So hi everyone, welcome to PrepLadder, NEET SS, and we are going to discuss today the NEET SS Surgical Gastroenterology recalls. So the paper was overall, I feel that the paper was not very tough. It was simple, and let us have a quick, you can say, recap of the questions. And they were easy questions. Most common organ, you can say, most common tumor associated after a solid organ transplantation. We have lot of questions of this kind which we have discussed already in the QBank series. So Kaposi is one which can occur, and squamous cell cancer is one which can occur, but in case of solid organ transplantation, it is SCC which is the most common type. So answer for this is a SCC. The Maastricht classification, again this is a classification for the organ donation. So organ donation after death, this is what is the Maastricht classification. It's a very famous easy classification, already discussed in the, you can say, theory class in detail. So which is not a risk factor for CAGB students. Now you have to understand abnormal pancreatobiliary duct is also, yes, a risk factor. Giant stones, so more than 2.5 centimeter stones, they have 10% lifetime increase, 10 times lifetime increase, or 10% lifetime increase risk. Otherwise a normal stone has what? 2.5% lifetime risk. Polyp more than 1, yes, and more than 3 stone is not. So answer for this is 3. Though more than 3, D, more than 3 stones is not a risk factor, which is not a feature of acute cholecystitis. When we talk about the Tokyo guidelines, TG13 and TG18, wall thickness more than 5 mm is considered to be significant, not 2 mm. Remember, pericholecystic fluid, a probe Murphy's, and a sludge, they are all considered as a USG guided, USG guided parameter that we see. So A is incorrect here. It is not a feature of this. Now, which of the following is a risk factor for developing pancreatitis post ERCP? Remember, a female gender, prior history of pancreatitis, narrow duct. These are very important things. And if you see, age is not that important. It is young more than elderly. So previous history or prior history is the most significant answer in this case. Then when we talk about this question, a patient presented with 12 mm polyp in gallbladder with symptoms of cholecystitis, treatment of choice. Remember, polyp more than 10 mm or rapidly increasing in size. What do you mean by rapidly increasing in size? More than 6, you can say more than 5 to 6 mm per 6 months. This is again an indication, or any symptomatic GB polyp, or students GB polyp associated with what? Associated with stones. So here laparoscopic cholecystectomy would be the answer. This is what is, because the polyp size is more than 1 centimeter. Now female presents with upper abdominal pain post lap cholecystectomy, which was done 8 days prior. USG shows a collection of 8/7/6 in the subhepatic, so there is significant collection. Which of the following is the next line? Remember, if this is a stable patient, so first thing is you will go for either a diagnostic lab with putting of drain or USG guided pigtail. So USG guided pigtail is what is very, very, very important. First of all, you should be going for evacuation, and along with that you should be seeing what is the status of injury. So MRCP is also very important. So GB cancer with perimuscular involvement, so it's always, remember, perimuscular involvement. So T1A is confined to mucosa, T1B is muscularis, T2 is perimuscular, T3 is into liver, and T4 into the other structure. So this is what is a classical T2A. So T2A is the answer for this. Next question is very easy. 72-year-old presents with symptoms of acute cholecystitis. What will be the next treatment? Answer is laparoscopic cholecystectomy. This is what is simple, very, very simple thing. 44-year-old woman presented with gallstones and pneumobilia. Remember, this is now you can say duodenal or enteric fistula. USG shows dilated bowel loops. She has given a history of constipation. Now, this is acute obstruction. This is what is known as a gallstone ileus. So, this is classical gallstone ileus. And when we talk about gallstone ileus, it is nothing but due to the stone which is causing recurrent acute cholecystitis over the time. There is development of what? A fistulous tract through which the stone might slip down and go into the terminal part of the, you can say, bowel, and get impacted there. And in exchange, the air from the bowel might leak out and resulting in what? Pneumobilia. So pneumobilia, intestinal obstruction and ectopic gallstone. This is what is known as a Wriggler's triad. So classical Wriggler's triad is mentioned here. Now fecal elastase in severe cholecystitis. Remember, fecal elastase is found to be less than 100 micrograms. This is a straightforward question. 6-week-old presented to you with non-bilious vomiting. Non-bilious vomiting, what is the clinical diagnosis? Remember, when we talk about duodenal atresia, the atresias are mostly distal to the ligament of, distal to the ampulla. So in that case, you generally have a bilious vomiting. It's a non-bilious. So the answer is congenital hypertrophic biliary stenosis. This is what is answer. Remember, 6 to 10 weeks, the presentation start. Presentation is never at the time of birth. Next is a very simple question. 4-year-old presented with massive gastrointestinal bleed. 4-year. Which of the following is the most probable diagnosis? The answer is, you know that the most common GI abnormality congenital category, you have Meckel's diverticulum, and when you have an ectopic gastric mucosa, this gastric mucosa will be producing a lot of acid, and this acid is the reason which causes what? Ileal ulcer. So bleeding actually occurs here from the ileal ulcers. It is the ileal ulcers which are causing the bleeding, and this is what is very, very, very important. Gold standard diagnostic tool for Hirschsprung's disease. What is that? Full thickness rectal biopsy. Remember rule of 1, 2, 3. So from the anal verge and from the dentate line, you go inside 1 centimeter, 2 centimeter, 3 centimeter. You take the full thickness biopsy so that you come to know whether it is ganglionic segment. So full thickness rectal biopsy. Other investigations are also important, but yes, they are not the gold standard for diagnosis. Now, 47-year-old with ulcerative colitis presents with obstructive jaundice. What is the answer? This is a straightforward question. It's a primary sclerosing cholangitis which is involving the extrabiliary and intrahepatic biliary radicals causing strictures. Which of the following is the wrong for management of choledochal cyst? Remember, it is 4A, which includes intrahepatic and extrahepatic cyst. So intrahepatic cyst, we don't do anything. It is only the management of extrahepatic cyst that we do, and therefore we go for the excision of cyst followed by, so we go for excision of extrahepatic cyst. Along with that, Roux and Y hepaticojejunostomy. As far as the intrahepatic component is concerned, we will always wait for this patient to develop fibrosis, cirrhosis, and then only we go for the transplant. When we talk about type 3, it's a choledococele, that is the intraduodenal part. So first is the endoscopic deroofing can be done. So endoscopic deroofing, if it fails, then we go for transduodenal excision. Type 5 is a Carolese, which is associated with intense periportal fibrosis. So here, since this is a pre-malignant, transplant is mandatory. And type 2, you know, it's a supraduodenal. It's a supraduodenal saccular cyst. So simply you are going for one simple thing, that is you are going for excision. No Roux and Y hepaticojejunostomy is required, and you go for a primary closure over what, students? Over a T-tube. This is what is a very simple thing. So the answer is, this is not the management. Gastrin secretion is not stimulated by the carbohydrates. So carbohydrates generally don't stimulate the gastrin secretion. So this is a question belonging to physiology. Dumping syndrome, actually it is due to the direct entry of food into the intestine without undergoing any, you can say, any assimilation. So when we talk about dumping syndrome, there is one very important phenomena which is associated with Billroth 1. I have discussed this thing in detail and depth in the classroom also, that there is something which is known as duodenal break or neuroendocrinal break. So when the food directly enters into the intestine, that is the first part of the duodenum has been anastomosed with the stomach after distal gastrectomy. This is Billroth 1. This Billroth 1 will stimulate, actually the duodenum will stimulate the release of incretins, bombesin, and they will slow down the pace or the motility. So the speed at which this high osmotic content is going into the bowel actually is reduced, and that is the place where you actually don't have the dumping. Otherwise, when you talk about the Roux and Y gastrojejunostomy or loop gastrojejunostomy, the food is directly entering into the intestine and causing what? Evacuation of the water from the intestinal cells, resulting in bloating, diarrhea, and then post-dumping syndromes. So Billroth 1, you have the least, I will not say it's never seen, but yes, it is least here. Wilkie's syndrome or SMA syndrome, it is due to the decreased aortomesenteric angle. You know one very important thing, that this is aorta and this is the SMA, and between this is the duodenum going. So remember, around the duodenum you have lot of periduodenal fat. As there is in some patients there may be some rapid weight loss, and because of this rapid weight loss there is loss of fat, and because there is loss of fat, now what is going to happen, students? This aortomesenteric angle is reduced, and reduction of this SMA mesenteric angle, so this is aorta, and if this angle is reduced, there will be compression of the duodenum. This is what is a nutcracker like phenomena. So decrease in angle, this is due to compression of SMA. This is compression of the duodenum by SMA. So this is A, which is the answer. A is the answer here. Next is, if you see this is a EUS image, and EUS image, this is mucosa, submucosa, and going into the muscle. So this is a T2. Any tumor going into the muscle on rectal, transrectal ultrasound, you are getting this. So this is a T2 image. ERAS protocol is enhanced or early recovery after surgery. If you have gone through my chapter of trauma, this is the first thing that I have discussed in the secondary survey. So remember, preoperative carbohydrate loading, not utilizing, or you can say using the minimum number of drains. This is again very important. Then early initiation of feed and early discharge, early removal of catheters. This is what is advocated. So this is actually C, which is the right option here. Boundaries of Petit's triangle, you know that we have external oblique, latissimus dorsi, and iliac crest. So this is what is the answer. We have two triangles, Grenfell, which is above, where you have the internal oblique. So internal oblique and external oblique, both are involved in two triangles. One is Petit's, one is Grenfell's. So this is what is Petit's. Next is, which of the following is correct? Remember, FAP and HNPCC both are autosomal dominant. In FAP, it is autosomal dominant associated with 5 or APC gene mutation, or 5q. When we talk about HNPCC, it is autosomal dominant more than autosomal recessive. So if we talk about A and B, A is a better answer than B. Next, let us talk about the next question, which is again a very simple. A patient with ulcerative colitis presenting to you with symptoms of obstructive jaundice. So I am not going to think about the coexisting sclerosing cholangitis. So MRCP is always, so D is always better than B in this case. HIDA scan is not the first line investigation. We'll go for MRCP in this case. Most common extraintestinal symptom of Crohn's, answer is arthritis, and this is, everyone is knowing, this is arthritis. Now, if you see this endoscopy image, this is a classical GIST in the view. So GIST is basically a CCT diagnosis. However, we'll go for an endoscopic biopsy. Most of the time it is submucosal, so you might miss out. Yes, so biopsy and CCT abdomen is the most important thing. A suspicion of GIST with a biopsy finding, maybe equivocal, but post-operative, when you go for a wedge resection or gastrectomy, then you will go for the staining with certain markers like CKIT, or you can say we have DOGG1 diagnosed only in gastric GIST. So these will be the markers. So B I would say is the right answer. Which of the following cells protect the intestinal cells from damage? Everyone knows that these are the protecting cells, Paneth cells. Paneth cells, this is a question of physiology. Now, interleukin 2 is secreted by interleukin 2. This is again a question which is very simple. We have T cell, B cell, mast cell. So T cell stimulation leads to actually secretion of interleukin 2. Now, Gardasil and Cervarix are the two vaccine. If the answer was Cervarix, question was Cervarix, it is 6, 11, 16 and 18. Gardasil is 16 and 18 and also against the strain 31 and 33, like, which is also preventing the, you can say more, less aggressive strains which are causing warts, etc. So 16, 18, 31, 33 is included in this. Now, 40-year-old with severe chest pain radiating to back, this is again indicative of what? Esophageal perforation. So answer is Bohave syndrome. Only vomiting followed by bleeding, GI bleed, this would have been Mallory-Weiss-Stare. Amsterdam criteria, which is not included. Remember, at least one relative should be detected with cancer less than 50 years. 2 successive generations should be involved. 3 relatives should be involved. So remember that 1, 2, 3. At least one cancer before 50, 2 successive generation, and 3 individuals or of the family should be involved. At least 2 of them should be first degree relatives. So syndrome with oral pigmentation, I hope you know that's a Peutz-Jeghers oral or perioral melanosis. So Peutz-Jeghers is a straightforward answer for this. Montreal classification for ileocolic. So here it should be according to the options. If it is more than 40, because answers are not matching for this, more than 40, I would take it A3. Otherwise, if it is 40, 17, up to 17, A1, up to 40, A2, after 40. So either it will be A1 or A2. This is a recall. So I think it should be more than 80, more than 40, because answer is not matching. Ileum, it is L1. Colon, it is L2. Ileocolic, it is L3, and proximal, it is L4. So it is involving, so it is A2 and then it is L3. Then what, since it's a fistula, it is penetrating, that is why it should be B3. So either A3, L3, B3 or A2, L3, B3. So the answer most probable is this. If this is the recall, if this question is strictly 40, then it should be A2, L3, B3. Now when we talk about this question, 42 with jaundice, dilated intrahepatic duct, normal CBD, gallstone present in emergency. What is this? Remember, normal CBD, dilated intrahepatic ducts. This is actually the impaction of the stone on the proximal part of the hepatic duct, and this is what is important. That is why intrahepatic biliary radicals are dilated, because of the obstruction, and this obstruction is due to impaction of the gallstones presented at the neck. So this is a classical type 1 Mirzi syndrome. If it penetrates, it will be a type 2 Mirzi syndrome. So the answer for this is 1A. Not seen in acute pancreatitis, excessive CRP, SOFA, an organ failure. Remember, none of them, all of them are present here. All of them. Name the bile duct injury in the image. Actually, this was a lateral wall biliary injury which was shown here. I couldn't add the image. So, lateral wall bile duct injury. Lateral wall bile duct injury is actually a type C. Type C. Remember, type A is a minor duct injury or a cystic stump leak. So, minor duct injury or cystic stump leak. But this is a type D, sorry. Type D. Cystic stump leak. When we talk about type B, it is segmental duct injury without leak, segmental duct injury with leak, it's a type C. So actually type D was the image, lateral wall biliary injury. So answer is type D, but I am discussing this because the image is not, no one could recall the image properly. Now acute atrial fibrillation with bowel gangrosis, gangrene, this is actually acute mesenteric ischemia because of the embolus or thrombosis. The heparinization, now there embolization is more important because you have a atrial fibrillation. So heparinization is the first thing, then open thrombectomy has to be done for this patient. Now IPMN, you know, severe, if it is intramural nodule more than 3 centimeters, so here 3 mm, you have more than 5 mm. MPD dilated more than 6 mm, you have 1 centimeter. Jaundice and pancreatitis. So remember, jaundice is actually not considered as part of any of the criteria, but pancreatitis is a risk factor for IPMN. So here the answer, both of these are not associated as a high risk parameter, jaundice or pancreatitis. I would say that if there is an intramural nodule, that would cause an external compression. So here pancreatitis would have been better answer, D than C. So this was the correct some recall based assessment of this NEET SS 2022. So I hope you enjoyed, and at PrepLadder we are working constantly for improving your user experience by getting these questions as a recall. And if you see, go through my notes or go through the notes, we have already discussed all of the topics in you can say in our text or some in some or the another form in lot of times, like in treasures, like in MCQ discussions, like in the theory. So do subscribe to PrepLadder, and if you are successful, congratulations. And if you fail to or you miss this time, don't worry, we are there with you. Again, prepare, and next time you will definitely get your dream branch. So thank you everyone.